Compass Publishing.
Good morning, everyone. Live from Seoul, South Korea. My name is Tim Thompson. I'm happy to be with you this morning. We've got an exciting webinar for you, I hope. I guess it's mainly geared toward a lot of adult learners, but certainly the ones that are teaching middle school, high school, even elementary, we can find a way to scaffold it for your students as well. So I'm very excited about working with you today. A couple shout outs before we get started. Happy to see Sarah in there 45 minutes early on the chat, ready to get going. Jeanette loved the music. I wish I could have heard it myself. Selamat pagi to the guy in Indonesia that said something. Actually, it was Juliana, hello to you. Ready to get started? Let's talk about utilizing digital resources for project-based learning. So if you look at the subtitle there, it says using and producing online content. So those two things those verbs are what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be talking about using the content that's already there and then working with our students to teach them how to produce new things as well. So I'm pretty excited about this. Shall we get started? Let's do it. So you can see in slide 2, I hope, that we're going to be working with online project-based learning activities. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is a foreign country scavenger hunt. And the second thing we're going to be talking about today is a current events website. So we look at building current events websites, and I'll teach you how to do that. And then we'll be talking about podcast and video projects as well. So those 3 areas are the areas we're going to be working on today. We've got plenty of time. We'll go through them nice and slow. Maybe even do a few things together. It should be fun. All right, let's get started with the first thing, money. Now, if we were face-to-face right now, I'd be handing out all sorts of foreign money, and you'd be just like your students. You'd be all excited, touching and playing and passing it around and looking at it, and hopefully not doing that, but holding it up to the light and seeing if there's watermarks, all sorts of interesting things. The coins are fun. The paper money's fun. If it's fun for you, I guarantee it'll be fun for your students as well. And one of the things that makes this so much fun is that it's authentic. It's authentic materials. It's not like opening up a book and seeing a picture of the money. It's actually putting your hands on it. So it's that TPR, right? Total physical response part of it that makes the students so excited. So hopefully, if you're able to take a few trips or your friends take a few trips, ask them to bring back just a little money from each country for you. Over time, you'll add it up, and it makes an activity like this so much more fun. So when we're doing an online country scavenger hunt, to start with something that at their table they've got a couple coins and a couple kinds of paper money from around the world really brings this activity to life. So let's take a look at one example. So this is a fun one. This is Zambian money. Extra bonus point if you know where Zambia is on the map. But if you look at this money, I think this is really interesting because if you look, these symbols that they use with this money, you see the bird that looks like an eagle, you see the huge tree in the background there. Lower section, you see the water buffalo, and you see the building. There's a lot of symbolism in the money that you could be discussing. Certainly, if you look at the money from your home country too, talking about what the symbols mean and how it represents your country is an interesting thing to do with your students as well. So now we take this, and I'm sure you can guess, one of the first things your students are going to ask is, how much is this worth? Right? They all want to know, is this actually super valuable or is it just like a couple of pennies? So that's a fun thing that they're certainly going to ask you very quickly. But let's talk about what we want them to do. So now that they've had this in their hands and they've seen that it's from Zambia, hopefully they can see that it's pretty clear there. On some currencies it's not as clear, or it's not written in English or the alphabet. So here, let's see what kind of things we want our students to do. So we're going to assume they either have a phone or internet access to a computer in the classroom. If you're working online still with your students, then certainly this could be a project that they do as homework or while you're supervising online. So you'd want to say, okay, now that we've chosen a country, in this case it's Zambia, All right, so get ready. We're going to say what is the capital of the country. We're going to say what does the flag of the country look like. We're going to say what is the exchange rate. We're going to ask what would the flight route be from where you are to Zambia. And then we might wonder, if I was going to visit Zambia, what would be some things that I would want to do on a trip there, right? So why don't you guys take a minute and actually try to look up some of these things if you have access beyond what we're doing here. Otherwise, you can see, let's just think about this hypothetically. If you were going to look up the capital, what would you do? You'd probably go to your search engine and you'd probably type in, if you were a student, something very simple, Zambia capital. You don't have to type, what is the capital of Zambia? You could, but even with Google, very quick keywords will get you the result you're looking for. Same thing, Zambian flag or Zambia flag. Pretty quickly you go into the images and you're going to see a picture of the flag of that country. Exchange rate might be a little bit harder, but if you typed in Zambia money and then your currency, USD or dollars or in dollars, or you went to a website like xe.com, they've got exchange rates for you there. If you wanted to look up flight routes, you could go to one of the travel websites. You could go to Google Flights, type in where you're starting from, type in the capital of Zambia, which we'll find out in just a minute. I don't see anyone typing it into the chat yet that they've got the answer, but if you do, chuck it in there or you get 10 imaginary bonus points. And then fun things to do in Zambia, so you type in Zambia tourism, Zambia fun things to do, lots of examples there, lots of things we can do. Victoria Falls, very good, Caroline. Yeah, that is on the border. It is an amazing place. Great shopping there too. Okay, so do we have the capital? Does anyone know? I have not seen that in the chat yet. I don't see anyone here, any of the staff shouting it out. Oop, there we go. Okay, so Christian's got it. Lusaka is the capital. Very nice. You think about the flag. Maybe you have not seen that before. It looks like this. And then I went ahead and did a little homework last night, and I looked up what that 100 kwacha is worth, and it's actually pretty good, 5.47 US dollars as of last night. So you have that in your hand, it's about $5, pretty cool. Now flight routes, again, where you're starting from, you'd have to type that in. Lots of different ways to do that. So think about this. This is the kind of project that you could do in a single class. Again, give them 10 minutes to play with the money, look at the kind of money, make some predictions about the money, notice some things about the money, and then very quickly, if they've chosen that money, you give them these things to look up. Then what you can do, let's say they're working in groups, maybe each group member has chosen a different country, then they can then share the information they found. So they would say, hey, what was your country? My country was Zambia. Okay, what's the capital? Now you've got a little information gap thing going, you've got communication happening at the table, very basic, very simple, you've scaffolded it, it's on the board. What is the capital of? What does the flag look like? So you can either give them that language, or maybe if their level's a bit advanced, they can do that on their own. So this is a fun kind of thing. It's very useful for them to get some cultural knowledge, some geographic knowledge, to get them interested in other parts of the world, and they're all hopefully doing the searches in English. So that's what we want to try to get them to do. Again, this is the kind of thing that when the teacher's not there, they might have to do. So for the teacher to be able to do that as the coach, to say, if you need help, I'm here, that's a great thing to do when you can oversee it, right? And then later, they feel more comfortable doing it on their own because they've already done it at least once. I remember one day, my daughter, who's now in middle school, came home, I think this was 1 or 2 years ago, so the last 2 years of elementary school. She came home one day and she said, Daddy, we did something really fun in school today. Now I'm going to tell you that does not normally happen. Usually she comes home and I say, how was school? She says, fine. So suddenly she comes home and she comes to me and says, we did something really fun today. I said, wow, oh my goodness, what was it? We planned trips to another city inside Korea, right? Jeju Island. We planned a trip. I'm like, wow, okay, how did you do that? The teacher gave us a budget, and with our friends, we made airline reservations, we chose the hotel, we chose some restaurants, we did all our online research, and it was so much fun because we had to argue about should we spend more for the hotel and less on food, or get a cheaper hotel and spend more on sightseeing, or cut out sightseeing and just eat and relax. So she really enjoyed that because, you know, when we go on a vacation, I have to do all that work. And she actually said, I understand now why it can be difficult for you to have to do this with a budget. So it became a very practical activity, and she really enjoyed that. You know, one of some of the most motivating words that you can say to your students are these 3 words: close your books, right? Sometimes the students need a little time to close their books. Sometimes you scare them when they think it's a test coming. The other time they're doing something online or a game or a group activity that's a little bit more practical, and I know that they enjoy that. So use those words when you can. Not all the time, we need our books, but sometimes to say close your books, you're going to see that the attention span of the students really changes when you say that. All right, now let's move. Thank you, Jeanette. Now let's move on to current events. Now this is something I did at the university level, but I challenge you guys. You probably have to be a bit more hands-on as the teacher if you do it with younger learners, but I still think it's possible. So let's look at how to work with current events and put together current events websites. So the first thing we want to talk about is that we want to make this group work, right? So for groups, we want to make sure that they have 3 or 4 group members. Partners probably could do it, but I think you want a few more brains in the group. That can make deciding on topics a bit harder, but you know, sometimes one person's a little bit weaker and you need a bigger group there to do that. So you want to put them in groups of 3 or 4. You want to have students select a current event or topic of interest that they feel is not being covered sufficiently, right? So if you, I remember, you know, a couple years ago, they were doing all sorts of interesting topics. Certainly the topics that are going on right now these days around the world are getting plenty of coverage, so I'm not sure that the protest in America or things like that would be the best topic because there's so much coverage. So you want to choose something that has a bit less coverage. So maybe elections going on in a different country, or you know, the new Galaxy Note 20 that I hear is coming out soon. People might be excited about that. So to collect some of the information that they've gotten from different sources and put them in one source, that's kind of what we're aiming at here, something like that. So again, we want to have students collect and organize published content on the subject. Now, does that mean that they can't produce their own? No, it doesn't mean that. But certainly it's easier for them to read, grab something, link to that, and then put them all in one place, because that way they're doing web searching, which is a skill. You'd be surprised that some students still have a lot of trouble doing web searches in English. So here is something where they're going to be expected to do that, but as the teacher, you can supervise, oversee, guide, help them with that. And now I'm going to do a little plug. You can create a free Weebly website. Now there are other free website services out there. Wix is one. A lot of people use WordPress. I put Weebly because I have experience with my website is in Weebly, and my students made their own websites in Weebly. They all said it was easy, so that's why I'm suggesting that one. Now here they can use a variety of media links to cover that topic. Again, linking to other pages, summarizing what they see, pulling in infographics, creating infographics, and then either producing or linking over short videos, podcasts, whatever on that topic. Again, let them be creative, let them make a lot of different things, you know, let them get out there. We had students one time make a little video debating this gaming system versus that gaming system, like Sega versus Nintendo or something like that. And it turned out to be really funny. The students really enjoyed watching it. And I do remember a few students saying, I was wondering which one to buy. This helped me make a decision. So it was actually practical as well as entertaining. It was edutaining. So the other students really enjoyed that. So the target audience, for example, was very satisfied, and that's always something you want to see at the end of it. Is not that everyone is like, well, why did we have to listen to this? But wow, thanks, that was really interesting and useful. So you can see here, that was the how, but the why, as the teacher, justifying it to yourself, justifying it to your students, justifying it to parents who might be like, why are you wasting your time doing that? The principal that comes in and says, it's very quiet in there, what are they doing? Well, they are researching, they're working, they're going to produce something at the end. We will be able to see what the final product is. And see, that's a key. Having a final product, right? Maybe over time, putting together a portfolio of production. That's something that's going to be really important and useful later on, right? It's not that they take a test and it's all gone. They have something there that they can say, I can do this. I know I can do this because I have done this. So the why, let's get to that. So again, we're starting with group work, right? We've got group work. You get older in life and you still have to work in teams and groups sometimes. So certainly getting experience negotiating with team members, making decisions in a timely manner, maybe someone taking a leadership role, the leadership role rotating between different group members or among different group members over the course of a semester. All these things are very useful for young learners and even high school and university students because you get out in the real world and we still have to do this. So like I said, leadership, whether you want to assign the group leader for that group, you have them decide. You should try to get it to rotate if you're doing multiple projects like this over the course of a semester. But leadership is something that they will notice. I had trouble getting these guys to do this. I had trouble delegating the work. And if you do some sort of reflective activity at the end where you say, how was Marco as a group leader, right? Or Marco, how was your experience as a group leader? They may realize and think back and go, yeah, I kind of made some mistakes. But hey, we're in the classroom. This is where you should make mistakes, right? You should make them in the classroom so when you get out into the real world, you've learned from that and you don't make the same mistake again. Here's a big one, all right? Time management skills. Certainly when you have a project that is something that might be over multiple weeks, having them, for example, select a topic by the end of the first class might be critical because if they have not done that, then first of all, it becomes homework and nobody wants homework. But second, the students who have made the decision quickly can suddenly get to work. So now they've already got a head start on the rest of the teams, and that's an important thing. So time management skills, when students are consistently turning in things late, right, we've got to help them with their time management skills. So certainly, even if they fail on the first one, to say, okay, let's look back. What made you become slower or fall behind the schedule that didn't allow you to finish this on time? I think that's an important thing for the young learners. So here, independence. We talked about close your books, right? Suddenly, as the teacher, it can be very tempting to want to talk the entire class. Some newer teachers especially feel like if I'm not talking, I'm not teaching. So it can be very hard, let's call it challenging, to be hands-off, to take your hands off and say, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to explain my expectations. Then I'm going to stand back. I'm going to step back and I'm going to give you time. I'm going to give you 15, 20, 30 minutes to work on your own with the computer, work in your groups, negotiate, and I'm going to step back, and if you need me, I'm right here. But if you don't, I'm going to stand back and let you work. And again, I might slowly make my way through the classroom just to check and close that proximity so that they feel the need, hopefully, to stick with the second language. But basically, I'm a resource. If you need me, raise your hand. So this is an important thing because you want to be able to teach your students to pull from you so that you don't have to keep pushing content onto them. If you're nothing more than a pushing teacher, then they're going to be uncomfortable pulling. They're going to be uncomfortable saying, excuse me, how do I do this? Or you told me this, but now I want to do this. How do I do this? So they should feel very comfortable pulling from you when you're the resource who's quietly standing on the side of the room. So along those lines, asking for help, asking for feedback, not just when it's time to turn it in for a grade. This is something that students have trouble with sometimes, is to check that they're on the right track mid-project and not wait till the assessment time at the end of the project. Sometimes students, they've been doing it the wrong way the entire time, they turn it in, they get a poor grade, and they say, I don't know what happened. Well, if you had checked in, I don't know, a couple weeks earlier, I could have steered you in a different direction and said, you know what, I don't think this is going to work out. Why don't we switch gears and try something else? So asking for a little help or feedback mid-project is something that as the teacher we may have to teach them to do. So don't be afraid to teach them to do that. All right, so along those lines, attention to detail, paying attention to the little things. So whether we point them out, whether a group member points them out, whether we have an ideal example for them to look at, all these things are going to go into attention to detail. Catching little typos when they create their website pages, making sure that the links work. You'd be surprised how many times a student will submit their project and I want to check it out, I'm excited about it, I click on the link and the link doesn't work, because they left off one little letter or they got the colon into a semicolon, something like that comes up. And of course, very frustratedly, I say, did you check it? And what do you think they say? Right? So again, teaching them attention to detail. Check it. Same thing, doing something like this, right? You come in early, you make sure that your PowerPoint's up and working, you make sure that the lights are turned on, you make sure that check, you checked your battery. All these sort of things you need to come in and check, otherwise it's technology, things can go wrong very quickly. And so finally, again, even young learners, I think it's important. You know, how many young kids have TikTok channels or YouTube pages or things like that? So thinking about a target market or a target audience, what do they need, right? So if my daughter makes a TikTok channel, I'm probably not the target market. It's other, 13-year-old kids. So what I think is entertaining and what they think is entertaining, believe me, is very different. Believe me. But again, if I say, oh, that's kind of stupid, and I tell her not to post it, again, I'm not the target market. So when we think about who am I making this for? I was working with a guy the other day, working on virology and virus and high-level science stuff, and he was considering two different journals. One journal was a more broad journal, and one journal was a very specific high-tech journal. So we were talking about the title, and if he chose the high-tech journal, his title can be more technical, but if he chose the broader journal, then his title needed to be more broad and general because the audience was different. So he was like, oh yeah, I get it now. Well, even a middle schooler needs to be introduced to that idea. You don't do everything the same way for the same group. Different groups need things to be put together in different ways. All right, now here's a kind of checklist. This is just an example, some types of things. And again, it's not a rubric. The rubric would be very different. This is more of a checklist. So this is the kind of thing that gives them a direction to say, have we put together a somewhat complete project? So you can see we've got here, there's an organized landing page. So when someone goes to their new website, it gives them a preview of what they're going to see and then shows them the options. If you want to see this, click here. If you want to see this, click here, something like that. All the content has been published. Sometimes they forget to click save, right? And then all the links work. So we talked about the links. All the content is linked back to the landing page. There's nothing worse than getting to a page and you're like, okay, now what? So they should have a way to get back to their home page, maybe in the corner, a back button, something like that. Clearly labeled submenus. So again, if they've got different kinds of things, you want to have the submenus clearly labeled so that they can navigate around the site. That's good practice for them. They may make their own website someday. When you're stealing, liberating, copying, borrowing things from other websites, you need to explain where you got it from, right? You want to make it sound like I wrote this if you didn't write it. So that's certainly something when they get to university, you don't want plagiarism and citation to be a foreign concept. So, as English teachers, sometimes everything becomes our job. You know what I mean? Teaching a 5-paragraph essay, English teacher's job. Teaching presentation skills, English teacher's job. All these things fall into the English teacher's job. So introducing the idea of plagiarism or citations or things like that, never too early to start. The efficient and effective use of visuals. You and I both know that if you go to a website and it's all text, tiny text, dense, thick text, it's easy to go, no thanks, right? So inserting some pictures, blowing up the font size so that it's much more readable. Again, showing versus telling. I think that's a really important thing for websites. Why tell with all that text if you can show a picture, a diagram, an illustration, things like that. So teach them also to try to show instead of to always tell. Pages, yeah, same thing. Pages are not overly text heavy. The topic is fully covered, which means you don't have obvious questions when you go there that they didn't handle. And then again, a diverse range of sources. If they're copying 8 things from the same site, 1 thing from another, you could have just gone to the other site. Why did they make theirs? So the job is to get a variety of things, put them together in a nice tight package. When they've done this, when they've accomplished this, they feel great. When they get positive feedback, not just from the teacher, but from their classmates, or when they put it online and put a comments thing, anyone who says, wow, that was interesting, thanks, they feel great. They've produced something. This is their baby, so they do enjoy seeing that. Similarly, speaking of production, there are other things that students can produce. And I don't know about you, but I enjoy listening to podcasts. Podcasts are great when you're out taking a walk, when you're stuck on public transportation, when you're just sitting at home on a Saturday and you're thinking, I want to do something, but I also want some input. Podcasts are great. I listen to a couple different ones. I like This American Life. I like Freakonomics. There's a sports entertainment one, a couple of those I enjoy listening to. Again, go to any website. You can see a lot of different options for podcasts. But let's talk about how our students can actually produce podcasts. I think you'll be surprised. So again, how do they do it? It's easier than you think, right? With technology that they have these days in their pockets, it's not that hard to create a podcast. So they can do something as simple as recording on cell phones, right? So you don't need a huge studio. You don't need a huge couple $100 microphone. You don't need any of that. And a lot of podcasts are audio only. There are video podcasts, but for the purpose of this activity, let's just call it an audio podcast, right? So again, they don't have to worry about how they look. In a lot of cases, the kids, the younger kids especially, and then lower level English learners, they want to write out a script. And that means that they read the script. Well, good points and bad points about that, right? First of all, the fact that they've taken the time, they've put in their energy to create a script, maybe revise the script, maybe practice the script. Again, to memorize it, that's asking a lot. So if they wanted to try to read along with the script, you kind of have to understand that. But here's the key. I tell the students, try to trick me so that I don't know that you're reading it when I listen to your podcast. All right? You don't want it to sound like you're reading it because that's not fun to listen to. It sounds robotic, it doesn't sound natural, it's not fun, it's not conversational. You want it to sound like that, right? So in that case, you need to focus on acting, making sure that the voice sounds like they're having a fun conversation, discussing something, even if it's scripted, right? Even if it's scripted. So, for example, if you wanted then to have some free mixing software, something that's free but then allows you to cut and move the audio things around, insert some music, do things like that. Audacity, you can Google it, download it for free. I use it, really nice editing software package. That is what I used when we were doing it before. And yes, That's the thing. I have done a couple podcasts myself, so when you are teaching it, it's a lot easier to teach something when you say to the students, oh, I've done this too. I'm not just telling you to do it and I've never tried it. So to try it yourself, to make a sample episode, for example, with a friend, with your spouse, with your kid, with a student, whatever, to make a sample one, could certainly be a good and fun thing to say, okay, kids, let's listen to this. This is an example of what I'm talking about. Here, letting students work in pairs or groups of 3. Now again, when we worked on the website current events project, that was 3 or 4. Here I would recommend 2 or 3. Because here, if you think about it, you want everyone to chip in and contribute to the show. So whether it be a host and co-host, whether it be host and guest, whether it be 2 hosts and a guest, or a host and 2 guests, host and guest 1, host and guest 2, whatever the format is, 2 or 3 people is probably going to be the right number. If a kid says, look, I've got an idea, I want to do a solo podcast. As the teacher, you're going to have to make a decision and say, is this, what I want them to do? Let them try it, at least for the first round. Why not? If they say 4, you'd want to say why. And if they said, well, it's because we've really got this great idea of a panel and there's a host and the 3 panelists are representing A, B, and C, you know what? Go for it. Why not? So you should try to be flexible, but I would recommend 2 or 3 if they didn't know what they wanted to do. So I like to let them choose a theme. Now again, that can take time. It can take time for the kids to negotiate and agree on a theme, but I find that if I suggest a theme, if I assign a theme, their motivation is very different, right? It's more motivating when they choose something they have some passion about, that they are interested in, that they are excited about talking about. Even if it seems silly to you, again, maybe you're not in their target market. Maybe they're doing it for kids their own age, so keep that in mind. You want to assign minimum and maximum episode times. So you might want to say, this is just for fun, right? So you might want to say, I want each episode to be 3 to 4 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes, something like that. So enough time that they can establish a theme, maybe even break it up into sections. So a little intro monologue, a little interview, a little answer some questions from our fans, ha ha ha, right? And then a sort of sign off and say, you know what, tune in next week when we're going to talk about this. And then hopefully, get some ideas for the next thing. Because you do want to have more than one episode. You want to try to have the students create something that can be replicated over time. So they want to not just create the podcast, they want to create a podcast format, right? So something, let's say that their topic is K-pop, right? I think a lot of people these days are listening to K-pop. So let's say it's called K-pop Today. All right, fine. Episode 1 of K-pop Today might be talking about this group. So then episode 2 would be talking about a different group and then a different group. And so each episode would be focusing on a different group. So you could actually pull this off over time, right? But if you said, I'm going to talk about BTS, episode 1 BTS, episode 2 BTS, episode 3 BTS, well now it's not the K-pop podcast, it's the BTS podcast. So you've got to let them figure this out, but also sort of guide them along and say, look, you've called it this, but you're only doing this. Let's rethink that a little bit. So then, if you're feeling very ambitious and you really want to get their hands dirty, you say, let's upload these to a website such as SoundCloud. So SoundCloud is like the YouTube of audio. And then you can track, do they get clicks? And I remember I had a student who did something a couple of years ago, and the topic I thought was really, not a super popular topic, but it was so specific that when people did keyword searches, it came up and the person got a lot of clicks. It was about a book or something like that. And so they were talking about books in some certain genre, and it got a lot more clicks than I expected. So if it's something that's very general, let's call it K-pop, well, what if there's, 50 other podcasts about that? Suddenly, you're just one little fish in a small group or in a big group. But if you talk about something very unique, then you may not have a large target market, but when people are interested, you may be the only one out there. So there's different ways to approach this as well, and they can learn a lot from the results. So let's talk about why. Similarly, you've got teamwork skills, you've got leadership skills development. Again, when someone is working in a group, whether they're the leader or they try to do it democratically, you learn a lot about working with other people. You learn a lot about listening to other ideas, negotiating the ideas, doing things like that. So even younger kids, secondary level kids, university kids, even adults, if you're working with them, they can all benefit from this experience. Long and short-term time management, so whether it be that they have 2 weeks to make a couple episodes or to try to fit what they're doing inside a 3 to 4 minute window, 6 to 7 minute window, 5 to 8 minute window, whatever that time frame is. They're working on big project time management, and then they're working on inter-project time management. So there's a lot of different ways that they can benefit from that. Something like this, for example, right? We've got about an hour, so if I go over and I'm still talking an hour and 10 minutes, some of you might go, yay, bonus training, and some of you might be like, man, I gotta go. What's going on here, right? So with podcasts, you want to set a pretty strict time limit, because think about that. If you're making a radio show or a TV show, they need money for commercials and to go to the next show. You can't go over your time, and you can't have dead air. So that time management there is very important. Why not learn that in the school environment as well? Here's a key, and you may be surprised how much experience they already have. A lot of teachers, when I pitch an idea like this, they say, oh, you know, it's going to be very hard to teach the kids how to use all this tech. You know what? The kids may be teaching you how to use the tech. You'd be surprised how many kids have already made YouTube videos, put stuff on TikTok, things like that. So they may already have experience uploading their own content to the internet. So this probably will not be a foreign concept for a lot of people. For others it might, and you should be prepared to walk them through it, hold their hands while they're doing it. But for a lot of kids, and again, why not let them teach each other? So, you know, don't be afraid to have students create some helpful videos, which we'll talk about next, that can help you teach these things as well, so you don't have to teach it all by yourself. Similarly to what we talked about before with the websites, I think it's really important to let the students select their own content and topics. Why do we do this? Same thing, right? We want them to make sure that they're excited about it, that we're not handing them a topic and saying, do this. I know that if I was given a topic to write about, or if I chose my own topic, I'd be a lot more motivated and excited to write about my own topic. It may take a little bit longer to choose it, but once I've chosen it, I'm going to be a lot more passionate about that. So similarly, you're going to recognize a lot of these things because they carry over, and I like that they carry over, right? They're getting multiple experiences with this. So even if they sort of bomb the first one, by the time they get to some of these other ones, good things can happen, right? And then this is fun. Experience making advertising and promotional plans, including tags and keywords. This is something that's really tough for adults, right? It's tough for us if we have to choose, if we make our own website, how do we attract people to that website? How do we make sure that when people are searching in their search engines that they come across our site? So we need to have some keywords. So again, K-pop, BTS, podcast, you know, again, if you wanted to find a podcast on K-pop, what kind of things would you type into the search engine? They've got to start thinking like that. And then the more specific you can be, the more you will drive people to your website or to your podcast or to something like that. But it can be a bit of a foreign concept to students at first. So if they're not used to doing web searches, this may be totally alien to them. But that just means you have more opportunity to teach them something new. Never a bad thing. All right, now here, this can be very useful, it can be very painful, that the students actually then have a chance to listen to themselves in their second language. And you know what? When you're talking to your partner in the classroom, it's just coming out, and then you're speaking. It's the production, but then the reception's coming from your partner. You're only listening to them. You don't really listen to yourself. Well, you know what? When you do a podcast and you play it back and you're editing it and things like that, you do listen to yourself, and it can be painful. It's painful for me sometimes to listen to my podcast stuff in my first language. Now imagine if I'm listening to a pronunciation idiosyncrasy or error, or I hear myself making a grammar mistake and I go, oh, come on, why did I say it like that? But that's fine. You know what? Again, to expect perfection here, to expect the kids to be perfect. Tell you what, listen to native speakers of your own language on the radio, live radio, right? Guess what? They make mistakes all the time. They backtrack and repeat themselves, and they go, oh, no, no, no. And like today's webinar has not been 100% smooth. I've had to recast and restate what I'm saying. There have been some uhs and ahs. You know what? That's just part of it. So tell the kids, I don't expect it to be perfect, but I expect you to do your best and make it somewhat smooth. Make it as smooth as possible. And you know what? Try to make episode 2 smoother than episode 1. If there's episode 3, try to make that smoother than episode 2. But to say it must be perfect, like I said, you know, find a 30-second clip of some guy on the live radio and you're going to hear them all the time. That just happens. So realistic expectations are very important there. All right, so let's talk about a podcast checklist. You'll see that this one is for individual episodes. So this is not for the whole project. This is just for each episode. Did they match the time requirements? So you want to ask them, did they match the time requirements? And you'd want to make sure that they feel comfortable that it's inside the time. Did they speak at an appropriate volume and speed? Well, what happens when you get excited or nervous? Do you speak slower? Or do you speak faster? Normally we speak faster, right? So what happens is they planned a lot of stuff, but they got so excited that they've maybe finished too early. Another thing that can happen is that they get excited and they go off script. So now they're talking about something they didn't even plan because the red light was on and that made everybody nervous. And so they talked over the time. So they, you just need practice with that. In this case, I've got a clock on the wall so I can sort of monitor, check how I'm doing, right? Again, if you're doing the podcast in smaller chunks, then you don't have to try to hit your time with one big recording. You record 30 seconds, you record a minute and a half, you record a minute, you record another 30 seconds, and you finish up with 15 seconds. You add it all together, you're inside the window. And so you can think about it doing it that way as well. Number 3, energy and enthusiasm. Nobody wants to listen to a lot of people talk about this for, 5 minutes. It's not that much fun, right? Nobody wants to listen to that. So especially with audio. Here we have the benefit or punishment of getting to see the face, but in audio only, right? It's only the voice, maybe some background music. So the passion, the energy, the enthusiasm that comes through in the voice. You know what? It makes a difference. People can hear when you're smiling. Your voice changes sometimes when you're smiling and when you're just talking. So try to bring that out. Try to when you're giving the feedback, say, I didn't feel like you had that much passion, and that's where the reading we talked about comes into it. If they're reading, they still need to read with the energy and the passion. Used appropriate language, that the pronunciation was understandable. So yeah, again, don't try to show off and use big words here. You want to try to keep it as simple and clear as possible. But if you need some vocabulary to talk about your topic, hopefully they plan that out in advance. Appropriate introductions and conclusions. So again, a little intro to the show, maybe some music to get going. Welcome to the show. My name is, this is, today we're going to X, Y, and Z. And then again for the conclusion, thank you for joining us. Next time, join us. We're going to talk about this, maybe mention when, a week from now, tomorrow, things like that. Again, we talked about segments. So again, the intro segment, the interview segment, the discussion segment, all these segments that can come into part of a podcast. I think it's easier to do 4 small parts than to try to do one big thing. Same as writing a research paper, right? You don't write the whole paper. You write your introduction, then you write your lit review, then you write your results section. So all these things, they're easier when you break them up into chunks. And then again, appropriate teamwork and involvement. If I hear student A and B and A and B and A and B and C and A and B and A and B, thank you. And I'm like, hey, what happened to C? So either C needs to have had a bigger production and writing role in this, or they need to try to bump up their contribution to the speaking part. So you want to try to make it that the teamwork and involvement has been somewhat equal. So again, we go through check, check, check. We might say, you know what, I didn't feel like you did this. Either your score goes down, or I'll give you a chance to go and redo it, bring it back with some changes and some alterations to it. Or you could just say, episode 1 was lacking in this way. I'd like to see improvements for episode 2. That's fine too. Now again, overall, we might do a different checklist. So overall for our podcast, did we again have a target audience in mind? And the teacher may not be in that target audience. And that can be hard for the teacher sometimes. They're like, I don't care about this. And they say, it's not for you. Then the teacher has to understand that they're not going to be in every target audience. The podcast format and contents matched that target audience, right? The podcast could be sustained over time. Could there be an episode 10? Is it possible? Right? If you can see that if you're going to talk about Harry Potter books, they're great. But can you do 22 episodes? Only if you broke it up and said, okay, each episode is maybe one chapter in a book. But if you talked about one book per episode, you're going to run out pretty quickly. That they were effective in terms of entertainment or education, hopefully both, right? But again, you have to ask the students, what is your goal here? Are we trying to entertain? Are we trying to educate and teach? Or are we trying to combine? So here then the team made an appropriate promotion plan. They thought about what their keywords are going to be, and here there's goals for a number of hits. I see Sarah is saying, can I do a similar thing with second graders? If it's second graders of elementary school, it depends, right? I mean, they're going to need a lot more hand-holding. If their level is as low as I would imagine it would be, I'm not sure if a full podcast episode is something for them, but certainly recording them in audio talking about something can have benefits. Yeah, elementary. So you'd have to scaffold it down. You probably wouldn't want to do it exactly like I've laid out here. So it's going to be up to you to know what the level of your students, right? And then say, do I need to give them more time to script it out? What about this? What if you scripted out something and they read it and acted it out and then listened to it later? I think that could be useful for them in a number of ways. So then the last thing here is that the goals were met for a number of hits. If they said, I hope 25 people listen, I hope 10 people listen, I hope 100 people listen. That can be a fun thing too, and you can actually base a bit of the assessment on that. Did you get the number of hits? All right, we've got about 10, 12 minutes. Let's talk about our last thing, video projects. You'll see a lot of overlap between the podcast and the video projects because, well, it's the same kind of thing with just adding video. Now, when you add video, what that means is you're adding another level of complication, right? Because then you got to put your makeup on and get your costumes and get your backgrounds and all sorts of things like that. So you can see with the background picture here, again, high technology. You don't need the huge video camera that you used to have to check out of the office and there was only one in the school, and you don't have to worry about that. With phones these days, you've got total video in your hands. So cell phone recording, Windows Movie Maker is a free video editing software, very easy to use. Put it in, move it around, super easy. Again, working in pairs, groups of 3. If you did want to assign solo projects, something like a day in my life that's 1 minute long, I've had solo students do that and they've been very successful. Here, you probably want to have the teacher assign a theme, a bigger theme. So in my class, it could have been reteach something that we learned. Or teach next year's freshmen how to be successful in this freshman course. So again, reteaching, if it's academic writing, reteach how to write a 5-paragraph essay, something like that. You want to assign a minimum and maximum video length. So you might want to say, I want this to be about a minute. I want it to be 2.5 to 3 minutes. I want it to be, again, if you start making it longer, you know what that means? You have to watch more at home to grade them. So you don't want to make them too long. Longer doesn't mean better, right? We don't go to the theater and say, oh, what's your longest movie? I'd like that. We don't go to the library and say, what's your thickest book? I want that one. So longer doesn't mean better here. We want quality over quantity. And then here, have them upload podcast videos to YouTube, track their views. Now, here's the thing about uploading on YouTube. There are some jerks on YouTube, and they will leave mean comments. So you might want to disable comments and just let them track the views. So if you keep it inside a certain group that they need an invitation to watch it, like only the classmates can watch it, fine, let them do comments. But for the general public, I would disable comments for that. Why do we do this? You might recognize some of these things: teamwork, leadership skills, the management practice, time management, experience working with video technology, recording, editing. You know, if you're elementary or middle school, high school teacher, trust me, there are going to be opportunities in university or out in the real world where they may have to make them for their own business, for university classes. So, right, you've got to keep this in mind. Why not give them experience, but where you're there to help and oversee? And their classmates can help too. So you maybe assign a theme, but then you let them choose the subtopic and the content inside. So you're not overseeing and not giving them any choice. They still have some choice, but you guide them with the theme and then let them choose the choice hour, choose the subtopic and content after that. So again, here they get experience identifying the target audience based on the content. So it could be, like I said, next year's freshmen. It could be students at other schools at the same level who might have access to watch this. So if you do have a partner school in another country, right? You've got a friend who's teaching in Finland. So then you could have their kids watch your videos and your kids could watch their videos, do a, culture exchange, something like that. Similarly, making advertising, promotion plans, tags, keywords, all these things are very important. Giving them experience on how to do that. Is my video keeping up, or keeping up there? I don't see it matching. And then having the opportunity to watch and listen to themselves speak in their second language. I should be on the why to do it page, not the how to do it page, so maybe it got locked up there. Anyway, a lot of these things are the same as before, so it shouldn't be a totally new idea there, a new concept. Talking about the why to do it. A lot of that is recycled stuff, right? So, we should be looking at my video checklist slide, right? So for the video checklist, we've got things like, was it designed with a target audience in mind? Did the format and contents match that target audience? So that should sound familiar to you. Did the video match the time requirements? There we are. See, technology, man, you never know. Spoke at an appropriate volume and speed. So again, how do you test that? You ask your other classmates, could you understand? I had a lot of students, they actually added English subtitles as well, so that helped with that when they were uncomfortable with their pronunciation or something, that they did it that way. You know what? It's not unrealistic to even have them speak in their first language, but then have them make English subtitles as well. That could be an option. I'd love to hear them speak in English, but if you didn't feel like they could handle it, then maybe consider that. Showed, again, energy and enthusiasm, acting. They've got the teamwork aspect that you did see everyone sort of on the camera. You don't want one person to be behind the camera the entire time. Switch it out, different scenes. That it was effective in terms of entertaining or educating. That the team made an appropriate promotion plan. How are they going to let people know it's out there, right? Are they using social media? Are they using their Facebook pages to then say, hey guys, come and look at our video? Are they putting in the proper number of tags and keywords? How are they getting clicks, right? Because if you spend all the time and energy to write a book, to make a web page, to do something like that, don't you want people to look at it? So how are you getting people, how are you getting eyes on your product? And then finally, maybe, again, goals for a number of YouTube hits, something like that. And is it cheating to ask all your friends to watch it? No. If I write a book, I want all my friends to read it. So no, I don't think so. Again, it's not always going to be strangers. Some of our friends watching today, some of you are teachers, some of you may be, working in the industry here. So whatever you're doing, it's nice to have you with us, and I hope it's been useful for you. So you can see here on my next slide, I want to summarize by saying, let's talk about activities for getting students online to learn through English. I know that our job is to teach English, but we also need to give them opportunities to not just learn English, but to learn through English, to learn different things by using English, right? So we let them use English to accomplish things that they could also do in their L1, right? They could also do these things in their first language, but when the access is not as easily available in their first language, when there's a lot more stuff on the internet in English, it's a good way to say, look, let's just practice this, get our hands wet. So again, project-based learning opportunities, they improve the kids' technical skills, very good thing. Language skills, very good thing. And then soft skills too, like we talked about, the time management, the teamwork, and things like that. We're helping prepare them for success out in the real world. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that they're prepared to be successful when they leave our classrooms. Not just that they're successful on the small projects in our classrooms, but we want to prepare them for the future. If we can do that, I think we can pat ourselves on the back and say, I did a good job as a teacher. Okay? So, if you guys have any questions, you can type them in. I'll try to address them in the last couple of minutes here. I'll leave my contact information for you to take a look, but I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box there, and if I see any questions like Sarah had earlier, I'll be happy to address them. Very happy that you guys could join us. I see a lot of countries, people saying hello from different places around the world, so whether it's good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, I'm certainly happy that you joined us today. Again, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. I'm sure you can contact Compass, and they'd be happy to send you some resources. Okay, so Lucia says, may I apply working with teenagers? Yes, I think so. Certainly, if you're working with teenagers, you want to still be level appropriate, but the good thing about working with teenagers is they're already fairly tech savvy, so they're going to have some experience working with a lot of these concepts and websites and different softwares already, and they're very familiar with using a cell phone most of the time, so that's going to be great. All right, so again, hello from Peru, hello from Egypt. Aurora, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Lesson planning for projects. Yeah, again, lesson planning is going to be up to you as the teacher to say, how am I going to structure the time, right? Am I going to try to do this inside a single 40-minute class, or am I going to do this over a week? Am I going to try to do it, during a summer project, something like that? If I'm online, how much time do I want them to be spending, outside of my online classes? So it's up to you to figure out how much time do you want to give them, and then try to be very appropriate and not expect too much, because if they're working with group members in projects or team members, that can be a little bit challenging, right? So you want to make sure that they have time face-to-face if they're working together to get stuff done, that they don't have to then get together too much outside of class, especially for younger learners. That can be challenging. All right, so again, Mexico's in the house. Welcome, welcome. Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate that. Guys, thank you very much. I think we're almost out of time. I really appreciate you joining us, and hope to see you again.